Of the many superstars in the DC Comics mythos, I've always found myself interested in the character of Nightwing, for the way he imbues charm and spirit in his vigilantism. Even with DC Comics' recent Rebirth publication, I would say that the Nightwing series is by far one of the most well-written and intelligent solo series of the lot. Not only does writer Tim Seeley know how to tell both interesting and thrilling stories, but he also writes with literary undertones that leave the reader with deep thoughts to consider even after they leave the book. In my opinion, one of the best examples of this is the first Nightwing story arc, Better Than Batman. A story that not only keeps readers engaged with its action and plot, but also gives commentary on themes of social and philosophical significance. For a cursory summary of the story arc, Nightwing has been blackmailed into working for the aristocratic secret society, the Parliament of Owls. The Parliament, hoping to mold Nightwing into a pawn for their elitist endeavors, has Nightwing team up with a new and mysterious crooked mercenary by the name of Raptor. But of course, Nightwing still plans on betraying the Parliament as soon as he gets the chance. Now Nightwing, being the blue Boy Scout that he is, makes sure to update Batman and Batgirl about his covert operation as a seemingly loyal servant of the Parliament of Owls. Batgirl shows signs of nervousness at the idea, fearing that Nightwing might lose himself as a servant of the Parliament. But Nightwing assures her that despite whatever criminal acts he may commit, he'll always come back as a hero for justice. However, as Nightwing spends more time with Raptor, he begins to realize that the seemingly cruel mercenary isn't too different from himself. At the core of their moral codes, they both have a personal love for heroic figures like Robin Hood, vigilantes who help the poor and the weak by swiping from the uncaring rich. Nightwing even begins to feel that he has a genuine friendship in Raptor when the mercenary reveals that he can help Nightwing beat the Parliament of Owls. On one of their missions for the Parliament, Nightwing and Raptor encounter Batgirl, who's chased after them out of concern for Nightwing's well-being. Batgirl accuses Nightwing of losing sight of his moral code now that he finds Raptor as an ally, which leaves Nightwing a bit doubtful about himself. As the three of them go on their mission, Nightwing begins to think that Batgirl may be right and that he has in fact been leaning more towards Raptor's extremist tendencies. Eventually, Nightwing and Raptor manage to expose the Parliament of Owls' most well-kept secrets, and the secret society crumbles. Having defeated the villainous aristocracy, Nightwing sees Raptor as a real ally after the mercenary seems to sacrifice himself for Nightwing. But this all changes when Raptor begins to go on his own mission to beat the bourgeoisie. Knowing Nightwing's real identity as Dick Grayson, Raptor embarks on a new mission to save Nightwing from the evils of the rich and wealthy, by attempting to assassinate Bruce Wayne. Grayson manages to disrupt Raptor's efforts in time, but Raptor ends up revealing the real reason for why he's had such interest in Nightwing. He was in love with Nightwing's mother for having shown him sympathy when he was rejected by most of society and oppressed by the rich as a leper. With Raptor under custody and Bruce Wayne safe, Nightwing is relieved but also unsure of himself. He is no longer sure if he can trust his moral judgments, having seen so much of himself in Raptor prior to his attack on Bruce. But Bruce Wayne steps in and assures Nightwing that he still trusts Grayson with all of his heart. Now throughout the story arc, Nightwing likens his vigilantism under the Parliament of Owls to his years as a trapeze artist. He talks about how the swinging back and forth between sides of the circus ring wasn't all that different from the skill he used to swing between the Parliament's orders and his original moral code that Batman had taught him. Now this circus-themed metaphor may come across as a bit odd, but the notion of switching between ideals actually invokes a style of debate proposed by the late 18th century German philosopher Georg Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel, especially with the imagery of swinging. As a philosopher, Hegel proposed a variety of thoughts and perspective towards the world, humanity, and life. But one of his most enduring ideas was his belief on how to best approach the truth, through what is known as the Hegelian dialectic, also known by some as the pendulum dialectic. A dialectic is often called a logical argument. It's a conversational debate between two opposing sides to help reach a truthful conclusion that is supported by reason and rationale. Hegel proposed his own dialectic by simplifying arguments into three main phases, starting with phase 1, which is commonly called the thesis. This phase includes an introduction to a single side of the debate. We learn all about the side's ideas and what they hope to achieve. Phase 2 of the dialectic is often called the antithesis. This phase is characterized as the opposition to the thesis. Similarly, we learn all about the opposing side's counter-ideas, methods, and goals. So far, you can see why some might call this the pendulum dialectic. The conversation swings from one side of the debate to another. However, in real life, pendulums don't just swing forever, and Hegel didn't expect the debate to either. This brings us to the third phase of the dialectic, referred to as the synthesis. During this phase, both sides from the thesis and antithesis admit to the valid points that each side had, and try to compromise their values for the hope of reaching a bipartisan solution that characterizes the best parts of both of their arguments. As I said before, because the nature of the argument swings between both oppositional sides, the dialectic is also known as the pendulum dialectic, and still survives today as a method for reaching fair and rational compromises between two differing ideas. The conversation, much like a pendulum, swings between both sides' points, and ultimately settles to a middle ground that meets both of the arguments halfway. Using Hegel's philosophy towards compromise and conclusion, we can actually see Nightwing go through his own Hegelian dialectic throughout the story. Early on in the story, Nightwing admits that despite being loyal to Batman's teachings, there were always some aspects with his interrogation skills that he had always disagreed with. He agrees with Batman that every life deserves to be saved, but they don't see eye to eye on the idea that instilling fear into others is more important than learning to trust them. This is Nightwing during his thesis phase of the dialectic. However, up until he realizes Raptor is in fact a radical anti-capitalist terrorist, he finds himself favoring Raptor's teachings on justice more than Batman's. In the first conversation that Raptor and Nightwing have together, Raptor goes so far as to say that everything Batman had taught Nightwing was horribly wrong. Nightwing grows to agree with Raptor's ideas that improvising a plan has its merits, but Nightwing doesn't agree with Raptor that a few unjust actions are worth an ultimately just end goal. This swings Nightwing to the antithesis phase of the dialectic, wherein he learns Raptor's point of view on justice and contrasts it with Batman's. This phase goes on until the two of them overthrow the Parliament of Owls. The Nightwing we find ourselves with after Raptor's attack on Bruce Wayne is coming to terms with the final phase of synthesis. He shows a few signs of disillusionment, but he still believes that some of the aspects of Raptor's belief were just and reasonable. In fact, as the Nightwing series continues, we see time and time again moments where Nightwing makes reference to the utility of Raptor's style of justice. The idea of Nightwing having to compromise and reach a middle ground is in fact a recurring motif that flashes throughout the story. The Parliament of Owls constantly refers to Nightwing by his last name, Grayson, emphasizing that he is the Grey Son of Gotham, a person who doesn't live in either side of the black and white binarism that surrounds the city. Characters who go too far with their ideas are often punished for having such extreme ideologies, like the Parliament of Owls when they stuff their faces on their dystopian island. The fundamental characteristic of the Hegelian dialectic lies with its implication that, in most any argument, both sides of the discussion have valid points that are worth admiration. In fact, in the first issue of the series, Batman makes it explicitly clear that Nightwing has to stop coming to him for advice and find moral conclusion on his own. Whether or not Tim Seeley meant to invoke this centuries-old style of debate, his story still holds this essential characteristic of Hegel's philosophy at its narrative core. And as a result, it asks the reader to look at both Batman and Raptor and think, how can we make them both better in the form of Nightwing?